Hi,
Hi,
we are back for session number 38. Oh, 38.
38.
It's a lot of
Let's,
sessions.
let's give it a go. Give it a go, as they say in Scotland. I was thinking about something in particular regarding the path of a chela, and I remembered a book that is extremely important and helpful. It's very small, and it's called Practical Occultism. It's two articles written by HPB that someone put together into one book, one publication. And it's like a miniature Bible for any aspirant, any chela. I want to just read a couple of things out of it today, and probably for the rest of our sessions, just pick a couple of items out of this. And let me start with one of the things, and she's listing the requirements for chelas and enumerating them. In one of them, she says, none can feel the difference between himself and his fellow students, such as, I'm the wisest, I am more holy and pleasing to the teacher than my brother, and remain an upasaka, which is a term for chela. His thoughts must be predominantly fixed upon his heart, chasing therefrom every hostile thought to any living being. The heart must be full of the feeling of its non-separateness from the rest of beings as from all in nature. Otherwise, no success can follow.
Wow.
Lots of little succinct things like that that are just gems. Here's another one. She says, in the East, the spirit of non-separateness is inculcated as steadily from childhood up as in the West, the spirit of rivalry is. Personal ambition, personal feelings, and desires are not encouraged to grow so rampant there, meaning in the East. When the soil is naturally good, it is cultivated in the right way, and the child grows into a man in whom the habit of subordination of one's lower to one's higher self is strong and powerful. In the West, men think that their own likes and dislikes of other men and things are guiding principles for them to act upon, even when they do not make of them the law of their lives and seek to impose them upon others. Words for the wise. And here she's talking about your daily practice. She says, rise early as soon as you are awake, without lying idly in bed, half waking and half dreaming. Then earnestly pray. She doesn't say to whom you should pray, probably to your higher self, but it could be Ishvara, the God of nature. Earnestly pray that all mankind may be spiritually regenerated, that those who are struggling on the path of truth may be encouraged by your prayers, and work more earnestly and successfully, and that you may be strengthened and not yield to the seductions of the senses. Picture before your mind the form of your master as engaged in samadhi. Fix it before you, fill in all the details, think of him with reverence, and pray that all mistakes of omission and commission may be forgiven. This will greatly facilitate concentration, purify your heart, and do much more. Or reflect upon the defects of your character. Thoroughly realize their evils and the transient pleasures they give you, and firmly will that you shall try your best not to yield to them the next time.
That
Self-analysis.
the transient pleasures.
Yes, transient, exactly. Focus on what is real. Everything else is unreal. It's Maya. And then she also gives this advice: do not read much. If you read for 10 minutes, reflect for as many hours.
Wow. She says
If
to
you-
not read much, and yet she writes volumes like this for us to read.
Yes, but what I think about it, I've never heard of her sitting down and reading for hours and hours and hours. This information comes to her. Everything that she writes comes to her from her higher self or from the Mahatmas directly. She doesn't need the Library of Congress or the British Library. She has a much higher source of information. And the Mahatmas do too. That's where their information comes from, not from books.
So if you
But-
read for 10 minutes, contemplate it for 10 hours.
Exactly. Why not? Habituate yourself to solitude and to remaining alone with your thoughts. That's also contemplation. Obsessing about something does not only no good, but it creates negative energy for yourself and whoever you happen to be obsessing about. Accustom yourself to the thought that no one beside yourself can assist you, and wean away your affections from all things gradually. Before you sleep, pray as you did in the morning. Review the actions of the day and see wherein you have failed, and resolve that you will not fail in them tomorrow. Holy Toledo,
Brilliant.
if this isn't inspired information and teachings, I don't know what is. Let's talk about rounds and races and stuff like that there. Before we do, we have an announcement. What is it?
Our friend is here. You can't see her, though. She's back there.
We have a special guest today watching the recording session, and we may just introduce you at the end of the recording. All right. Last time we were in the midst of the third of 3 letters that were directed to A.O. Hume, but contained information for both of the Englishmen. They are, all of them, very profound. We're learning the most basic part of the secret doctrine. In just a few lessons, we're getting a really good outline of what HPB later presented to the world in about 15 or 1600 pages of information. We've been talking about specifically the early rounds. We learned that in the first round, it was the mineral kingdom that was established, but guess what? It wasn't anywhere close to being solid physical matter. This was still extremely spiritual, vague. If you read the early verses in the Bible, this is exactly what it is explaining. Everything was misty and vaporous and amorphous, no form. It was just a suggestion, basically. In the secret doctrine, we learn a little bit more about this. The very opening scene in the secret doctrine is the beginning of a new Universal Manvantara. And what is that?
The period of manifestation for a universe. The period of life after a rest.
After a very long, billions of years of rest, the universe comes to life again. And the very first thing that happens when it begins to wake up is this shiver of energy that just goes out through space, because that's all that existed during the Pralaya, and it reestablishes the focal points of where it existed before, Fohat. And we learned that everything is Svabhavat, and one of its manifestations is Fohat. Gives it that energy, or you can call it Shakti. It's a type of Shakti that is a creative force, and it reestablishes all of the focal points in space where it used to be before. But all that's there right now is stardust and planetary dust. There are no planets because everything was destroyed before the Pralaya began. So it starts anew from scratch, but not from scratch because it's based on the previous Manvantara. Nothing ever changes. The process is always the same, no matter what. In the mineral round, the first round, it only comes down very slightly at its lowest point. And it's extremely long. This is probably billions of years. Just the mineralization of space, of the new universe that is forming. In the second round, and we're going to focus only on our planet. So even though I referenced, first of all, a universal Manvantara, we're going to focus on our little Earth, one speck of mud in the midst of this gigantic universe that is incomprehensibly large. I read somewhere the other day that a new star is created every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, a new star, which would be a solar system.
Wow.
It seems crazy to me. I actually have to reread that and make sure I read it right.
Wow.
But we think about a supernova, which is what?
The death of a star.
Exactly. We call it nova, which means new, but it's actually not a new star. It's the death of a star. And we're going to talk about that today. It's going to be one of our topics. In the second round, now we're talking only our Earth, what we know now, which isn't in existence yet except as an idea. In the second round of activity, and after each one of these rounds, there is a pralaya, a resting phase, which is quite long. And nothing is destroyed, but it goes into a resting phase, and we're going to learn more about that. Second round is all about the plant kingdom. And still, it only comes down to what would maybe correspond to higher mind, possibly, somewhere in that realm. There's no physical at all, not even any astral at this point. So we've got minerals, and we've got plants. And we learned that all of these are living beings. These are monads that are having life experience. And guess what? Those monads, once they reach our stage, are also inhuman beings. One to one monad to one human being. In the secret doctrine, we learned that originally there were 90 billion monads. 1/3 of them looked at the forms and they said, we're not going into those, we're not going to inhabit those forms. They didn't make the cut, you're right. We only have 2/3 of the original. In the Bible, there's the story of 1/3 of the heavenly hosts that rebelled and did not go along with God or nature's plan, and so they were discarded. They failed. And so that left us with 60 billion monads that continued the evolutionary journey. In the third round, the evolution came down lower. It came down into what we now perceive as the astral or emotional realm. Now we've got 3 kingdoms on Earth, even though Earth is not yet fully material, not fully physical. And I think, remember in the session where we talked about the mystery of the leaf imprints in rocks, leaf imprints in insects and very tiny animals? And he said, if you understood the process, you would understand how that works. He was relating that to the transmission of letters phenomenally, how they were imprinted in paper at a distance.
He didn't give the details, but he alluded to the similarities.
So I'm thinking there's something to do with this period of time where everything was not fully physical yet, and yet partially physical. So I think that is part of the mystery, and we still don't know the full answer. But the main thing to keep in mind is that it was continually getting denser and denser up until just fairly recently. And we're talking recent, several million years ago. In geological terms, that's not even a blink of an eye. So only in the 4th round did we become humans, did those monads become human, and did they reach their maximum density. This is the very bottom of the process, the evolutionary process, but it's also, as we said before, the most critical. When religions say you've got one chance to make it, they think that means one single life. We found out it's not one life in physical form. It's at least 700 and maybe more. Typically, 777 countable incarnations
Is the average.
And some people go faster. Some people are slower. So we're getting some information here. Also, we learned that in the 5th round, those who have made the cut through humanity will become arhats, meaning Mahatmas. And they won't be operating on the physical realm. That doesn't mean there won't be still physical activity of some sort. But humanity will have moved on in their progression to become Mahatmas at a higher level of consciousness. And each round gets faster and faster. So each round gets denser up until the middle of the 4th one. Then it becomes less dense as it continues. And this is the path of a monad. So you can call it the path of the prodigal son, coming down away from its spiritual nature, as this is the very farthest you can be removed from it. And then those who have made the cut continue to return home. The others will finish the journey in a different Manvantara, in a different active phase. Nobody ever, as far as talking about monads, no one ever fails except temporarily. In the very last round, the 7th, we're all divine as you can get in any form of manifestation. We become creators ourselves, and we're talking about millions and millions of years in the process.
When you say the others will finish in another Manvantara, you mean the other 30% that didn't even come into existence in the first place?
They too.
But which group were you referring to? The ones that fail?
The ones that fail along the way, because once we get to human, not everybody gets enough experience, usable experience.
There's no failure prior to that, though, since there's no free will.
Right. Exactly. Everyone is doing their job. They're still spiritual in nature. They're
Like animals. Animals
innocent
can't
children.
sin.
Yeah, they're innocent. It's only when we get our human mind that we start messing up, so to speak, and making wrong choices. And everybody does, but some people learn from those, and other people insist on continuing to make those choices. We have slow people, and we have fast people, and we have the average. It's just the way it is. All right. Now we're almost ready to pick up where we left off, but let's talk a little bit about the one element, svabhava, which is the cause of all manifestation, not just physical, but all through the levels of manifestation. He mentions that svabhava becomes the source in its manifestation of the elements. And we're not talking just about physical elements. We're talking about what in ancient texts is referred to as the 5 elements, which are ether, air, water, fire, and earth in their descending order. The 6th one, he says, could be called Purusha Shakti, if you want. It relates to our own 6th principle, Buddhi. And the 7th, he said, is not allowed to be talked about except among initiates. And when he says initiates, he's talking about accepted chelas, those who have taken an oath and have made enough progress that they are trusted to be in the aura of the teacher, the Mahatma. Because in order to give them further training, they have to have purified themselves enough that the Mahatma can stand to even interact with that individual. As long as we have lower qualities in our nature, it absolutely prevents any further progress. We can go to a certain point and that's it. There is no further progress until we purify all of our koshas. So these 5 elements are indicative also of the creative force, and that is embodied in what is called elementals, nature spirits. Those are the basis of the entire universe. The elementals are. And when we question, why do we need to even know all of this stuff? Guess what? The Mahatmas are dealing with what we would term magic. And magic always involves working with elementals. And it can be extremely dangerous. As we learned already, one of the chelas apparently died because of a piece of phenomena that he was trying to accomplish that involved using elementals when something went horribly wrong. And basically, the elemental or elementals he was working with turned on him. These are similar to animals, and they can turn on us. We have to learn how to work with them, but if we don't do it from a sense of oneness and connection and utter love, they sometimes can take offense. So just a warning. We talked about the different fire elementals, salamanders and gnomes, and they have numerous names. There are 7 levels of elementals and numerous sub-levels within each realm, each kingdom of elementals. And he talks about fire, how we experience it as something, as the grossest level of manifestation of fire. And it can destroy or it can build. It has to be controlled very carefully. And that is true at a higher level, which would be kundalini. That's a creative fire, but it can also be a destroyer. And people who insist that they are purified enough that they can awaken kundalini are probably mistaken. And so that is why doing it prematurely is extremely dangerous. If you're lucky, it will only affect this lifetime. If you're not so lucky, it could affect several lifetimes. And if you're really not careful, as we saw with Mr. Ali Beg, he may have gone too far. We don't know. But black magicians who go beyond a certain level of attempting to live forever have lost their soul, we learned in a previous session. If you don't remember that, go back to sessions 29 and 30. There's a lot of information available on that. We're ready to pick up where we left off last time, which was the middle of letter number 67, where we talked about the material that I just reviewed. What did he say last? He said that the few early examples of the fifth round are immeasurably higher than we are spiritually, if not intellectually, since with the completion or full development of their fifth principle, intellectual soul, they have come nearer than we have and are closer in contact with their sixth principle, buddhi. Of course, many are the differentiated individuals, even in the fourth round, as germs of principles are not equally developed in all, but such is the rule. He told us that we are in the fourth round, the one where humans finally appear, and that the majority of humans are at a certain phase, but certain ones are moving faster. The Mahatmas, for one, they are a full round ahead of us, and we can join them. We can also move faster if we close the gap between what we have implemented of the teaching so far and what is required to become an accepted chela. So now we're going to see what happens with that fourth round when man shows up on the globes.
Man comes in on globe A after the other kingdoms have gone on, dividing our kingdoms into 7. The last 4 are what exoteric science divides into 3.
Now let's just review this chart that we introduced last time. So this circuit is one round. We've already gone through 3 in the establishment of minerals, animals, and vegetable. And now we're in the middle of the fourth round. We have already gone through these levels of manifestation, the first being very spiritual, the very highest, just below pure spirit, and then coming down. So each one takes a very long time, and it's only at D that we're fully physical, or that we're manifesting in physical bodies. Here, for example, somewhere along in the astral levels. And that will be where the adepts will be operating at their maximum density in the fifth round.
So when he says man comes in on globe A,
meaning this one.
But on which round.
This is the fourth round. So we, as humans, didn't start physically. We started way up here. And we had to go through a long process. All of these little local rings of manifestation in different forms at this very high level of spiritual manifestation.
But if we're talking about fourth round men and fifth round men, wouldn't there be first round and second round men?
Yes. In the first round, we manifested, or the monads manifested as minerals, plants. We are the ones who garnered all of that experience. But, yeah, that's in the round. Don't confuse that with root races. We're not even down to root races yet. That's going to be here, only on the physical realm. So here we're talking about our monad operating.
But KH has used the term many times, the fifth round men are among us already.
Right.
Round men. So
Right. So they would have made all of this progress that normally we won't make for millions of years. We as humanity.
So the third round men are animals, and the second round men are vegetables, and the first round men are minerals, you're saying? No? Fourth round men are us.
Yes.
KH says fifth round men are among us already.
Yes.
So would third round men, if we're the fourth round, who were the third round men? We can erase all this if we need to, but
We're talking about monads. So let's not consider it as men, but the monads who right now are operating as human beings now. In the first level of this fourth round, they're still not operating as human beings. They still have to go through these levels of manifestation again,
So I'll ignore what
recapitulating all of the others. Remember how he talked about the evolution of a planet and the evolution of a human being? Starting with conception, how it recapitulates the entire universe.
that does make sense. I was just referencing what he said about fifth round men, but I understand that the fourth round is when humans evolve. Only in the fourth round. We didn't evolve on the...
Right.
But he says fifth round men. So
Okay,
I'm taking that backwards.
Fifth round men, in many cases, are adepts.
Okay.
Now, I look at those not as a human, but as a new level of a new kingdom.
Okay.
That's a kingdom of nature.
But we don't have physical forms that are any more advanced than these bodies, so they look like humans. I get that.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Okay. No, it is extremely complicated. And like we said last time, you need to put yourself into a state of meditation, really, to understand this. Do that. Pause the video if you're watching this at home, and just collect yourself, and even maybe go to your sacred space and sit for 10 minutes in meditation, and then come back and start it again. And you might be surprised how your perception changes. As we said last time, you do not get this the way you would get information in a class at a university. It doesn't work that way. Up until a certain point, yes, it does. You can memorize data, you can spout out facts and figures, and it means whatever it means. But to really understand it, you have to access your higher self. It's the only way that you're going to get beyond a certain level. All right, let's continue.
To this, we add the kingdom of man, or the Deva kingdom.
And that's a separate level of evolution currently.
We'd better read the previous sentence. Dividing our kingdoms into 7, the last 4 are what exoteric science divides into 3, and that refers to the mineral, plant, and all of the animals, since exoteric science considers us animals.
Esoteric science considers that there are 7 kingdoms plus additional ones that start with elementals and even 2 levels below that, and many of which go through the Deva kingdom. But before they can go too far, they still have to go through human evolution too. That is crucial to any further development, because to become a Dhyan Chohan, a planetary spirit, you have to have experienced all possible permutations of manifestation. Everything, every last bit.
Now, regarding the kingdoms of man or the Deva kingdom, he says, the respective entities of these we divide into germinal, instinctive, semi-conscious, and fully conscious.
Okay, just like the different levels of consciousness taught in Raja Yoga.
The semi-conscious might be some of the nature spirits, huh?
Yes,
Gnomes
exactly.
And fairies and things.
And instinctive, also nature spirits, but also animals.
When all kingdoms have reached globe G,
Which is the highest,
the last one,
the last one.
they will not move forward to re-enter A ahead of man, but under a law of retardation, operative from the midpoint or Earth to G, and which equilibrates a principle of acceleration in the descending arc, they will have just finished their respective evolution of genera and species when man reaches his highest development on globe G in this or any round.
All right. Remember last time we talked about 3 different types of Manvantaras and Pralayas. The universal, which is an entire universe, the Big Bang. And the Pralaya is complete annihilation, so to speak. Not forever, but for a very long time. The same with the solar system. The solar system also has a pralaya, a bang where it comes into existence again, and a series of manifestations, and then another pralaya. On our local planet, which has Earth as the focal point, we also have a pralaya after a period of time, after each round. So we have 7 pralayas within our existence as a planetary system. And when that happens, it goes into a suspended animation. It doesn't get destroyed like the universe does at the end of its Manvantara. It goes into a suspended animation. So to me, that would mean that there are a minimal number of plants and animals still on the earth, maybe, for example, and that they get repopulated more quickly. We saw that on a smaller scale with the destruction of Atlantis, for example. The population of the world, whatever it was before that, was diminished to very, very small. And we see that in the Bible in the form of the flood and Noah and starting anew. It's actually based on truth. I'm guessing that there's always some kind of a core group that remains to reestablish any of these.
Like Noah.
Yeah, exactly.
More cultures than just that have flood myths. So there are flood myths in many religions and cultures.
Yeah, as we've seen before, all of our myths and legends and stories have a basis in fact. They just get very convoluted.
The reason for this is found in the enormously greater time required by them to develop their infinite varieties as compared with man.
So we saw the mineral kingdom takes the longest, and it's the basis of all the others. As we know, our bodies are made up of minerals. Plants are made up of minerals. And each of those kingdoms and we are those kingdoms, took longer. And it gets faster, the first one being the very longest cycle, and then it speeds up. Each one is faster and faster and faster.
The relative speed of development in the rings therefore naturally increases as we go up the scale from the mineral, which is what you just said. But these different rates are so adjusted by man staying longer in the interplanetary spheres of rest, for better or worse, so that all kingdoms finish their work simultaneously on the planet G. Can we show the rings again, since he's mentioning specifically rings here?
Now, which one are you talking about?
He's saying the relative speed of development in the rings. Which ones are the rings? But I think he might have meant to say round, though.
It's possible.
He says rings, but I think he meant round. He says the
Okay.
relative speed of development in the rings therefore naturally increases as we go up the scale from the mineral. And this whole
Okay.
time up until now, we've been talking about each round. I think he meant to say round.
And he does make mistakes sometimes.
Right?
So
Because isn't this the same concept that we've been talking about, how the
It
mineral
is.
kingdom takes forever?
it is.
Okay, so he probably meant round. Okay. For example, on our globe, we see the equilibrating law manifesting. From the first appearance of man, whether speechless or not, to his present one as a fourth, and the coming fifth round being the structural intention of his organization has not radically changed.
This is very important. Keep reading and then we'll discuss it.
Ethnological characteristics, however varied, in no way affect man as a human being. The fossil of man, or his skeleton, whether of the period of that mammalian branch of which he forms the crown, whether cyclops or dwarf, can be still recognized at a glance as a relic of man. Plants and animals, meanwhile, have become more and more unlike what they were. The scheme, with its septenary details, would be incomprehensible to man had he not the power, as the higher adepts have proved, of prematurely developing his sixth and seventh senses, those which will be the natural endowment of all in the corresponding rounds. That's what you just said earlier. We have to use our higher awareness to even understand this. That's what
Exactly.
he just said.
Exactly.
I like how KH backs up what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you, KH.
You're saying it, then he's like, yeah, Terry's right.
All right. So what he's pointing out here is that the variation among minerals, plants, and animals is enormous. You can look at one variety of plant and not even recognize any connection with some of the more advanced plants. And the same with animals. How do you take an amoeba and compare that to a giraffe? It's inconceivable the amount of variety that takes place in these other kingdoms. But when we get to the human kingdom, it's completely different. You can look at the skeletons of the most primitive human existences on Earth that we have, and they are still recognizable as human. And that again proves that it doesn't matter what form you're in right now. You can be one of the most advanced spiritual beings on this planet and still have something besides the latest version of human form.
That's why we shouldn't judge a book by its cover. The guy walking on the side of the road could be it could be a Chohan, could be.
And each one of them has their characteristics. As we've found out, many of the adepts prefer to be in an Asian body because it has qualities that make spiritual development far easier than being in a European body. It does.
Curious that he says, though, plants and animals, however, have become more and more unlike what they were. I wonder what plants and animals were like
Oh, we can only use our imagination. Even when they did get to the physical realm, we don't have any dinosaurs today, but we have traces of them, and our imagination goes wild trying to imagine what it was like having dinosaurs on the earth.
Our Lord Buddha, a sixth round man, would not have appeared in our epic, great as were his accumulated merits in previous rebirths, except for a mystery. We've talked about this mystery several times.
He has, and we can only speculate. I have thought about it, and the only thing I can come up with, because he's going to explain why it's impossible, my theory is that perhaps an exception was made in his case, and that instead of having to go through the last planetary pralaya, or one of the pralayas, that he was allowed to transfer to a different system where it
continue
was
his
not in
development.
a pralaya.
And continuous development, therefore
Yeah.
going faster.
He doesn't ever say that, but that's the only solution I can come up with.
And if that's the case, it might be because we needed to get one under our belt.
Yeah,
We needed-
exactly.
we needed to get our first one there,
Right.
and then
Right, because all of the previous Buddhas had come from another system.
now he blazed the path, and it'll be more simple for everybody else.
Yes.
Just like when Sir Edmund Hillary got to the top of Mount Everest, first guy documented in history. Many more people right after him were able to do it.
Right.
So,
No,
similar concept.
that's why you have to have pioneers and trailblazers, and we're all trying to be those trailblazers for our own generation.
Individuals cannot outrun the humanity of their round more than by one round, for supposedly it is mathematically impossible. You might say if the fountain of life flows ceaselessly, there should be men of all rounds on the earth at all times. The hint about planetary may dispel the misconceptions on this matter. The hint about planetary.
Now, I don't know what he's referring to, but I left it in there because it's obviously a hint.
Okay.
Maybe somebody else will figure it out.
Okay. When man is perfected with regard to a given round on globe A, he disappears from there, as had certain vegetables and animals.
All right.
Certain vegetables and animals.
Yeah, obviously some of them remained, but this is globe A, a very spiritual level.
By degrees, this globe loses its vitality and finally reaches the moon stage, or death, and so remains while man is making his 7 rings on G and passing his intercyclic period before starting on his next round, and so on with each globe in turn. I got to read that again. Can we see the chart?
This one?
Yeah. When man is perfected with regard to a given round. Okay. When man is perfected.
And he's
Globe
talking again about monads.
Okay. He disappears from there, as had certain vegetables and animals. By degrees, this globe loses its vitality and finally reaches the moon stage, or death, and so remains while man is making his 7 rings on G. 7 rings.
On G, yeah.
Okay. And passing his intercyclic period before. Okay, pralaya. Intercyclic means pralaya, I would imagine. Before starting on his next round. Okay. And so on with each globe in turn. Okay. Cool. As man, when completing his 7th ring on A, has just begun his first on G.
Obviously, they don't all move from one to the next level at the same time. You have the forerunners, you have the vast majority, and then you have the laggards. Those are tolerated up to a certain point before they start removing people from the race.
Is he talking about man as a group or man as an individual? Like, as man, when completing his seventh ring on A, has just begun his first
So he's
on
talking
G.
about the very slowest ones. And they don't all come in at the same time.
And as A dies when he leaves it for B, and so on, and since he must also remain in the intercyclic sphere after G, just as he has between every two planets, until the impulse again thrills the chain, clearly no one can be more than one round ahead of his kind.
And I have not figured out the exact reasoning for that, but I'm going to take him at his word and say that supposedly, mathematically, you can only get one round ahead of the rest of humanity.
Well, I think he's saying because man can't pass the seventh ring on A until G.
There's more to this because he points out that there's a change that happens when you get to the midpoint at the bottom. So let's keep going.
Buddha only forms an exception by virtue of the mystery. We have fifth round men among us because we are in the latter half of our septenary earth ring. In the first half, this could not have happened. It seems to make sense what he's saying. You can't be farther away from the beginning than a certain distance. Right. So
exactly.
They have to stay. That makes sense. In the first half, this could not have happened. The countless myriads of our fourth round humanity who have outrun us and completed their 7 rings on G have had time to pass their intercyclic period and begin their new round and work on globe D, which is ours. D's the bottom one.
Right.
Okay. But how can there be men of the first, second, third, sixth, and seventh rounds? This is what there are men on the first, second, third, sixth, and seventh
rounds. And he's obviously talking about monads.
So mineral men.
Right, exactly.
Rock people.
Exactly. We are the first.
Plant people.
Hey, thank you. That's exactly what it is.
We represent the first 3, and the 6th can only come at rare intervals and prematurely, like Buddhas, only under prepared conditions, and that the last named, the 7th, are not yet evolved. We have traced man out of a round into the nirvanic state between G and A. A was left dead in the last round. As the new round begins, it catches the new influx of life, reawakens to vitality, and begets all its kingdoms of a superior order to the last.
All right, so it's like what I said. When life leaves one of those, for now, in between rounds, there is a group, a seed group, so to speak, left behind to restart when the impulse comes around. It would be kind of strange to be a human being on a planet where there are very few other human beings, but it apparently happens.
A minor pralaya comes after this has been repeated 7 times.
All right.
The various globes are not destroyed by disintegration and dispersion of their particles, but pass into obscuration.
All right. Whereas the universe, at the end of its entire cycle, boom, gets destroyed, that doesn't happen here yet. It has to go through all 7 rounds. But when it comes to a pralaya, in between rounds, it's not an actual total pralaya. It's an obscuration, he calls it. It's a suspension. Everything goes into hibernation, let's say, until the next impulse, and then it takes off again. It has to warm up, it has to recapitulate, it has to get back up to speed again.
From this, they will re-emerge in their turn during the next septenary period. Within one solar period of a pralaya and manvantara, 7 such minor periods occur in an ascending scale of progressive development. To recapitulate, there are, in the round, 7 planetary or Earth rings for each kingdom, and 1 obscuration of each planet. The minor Manvantara is composed of 7 rounds, 49 rings, and 7 obscurations.
All right, so the total Manvantara of a planetary system, which is our Earth, has 7 rounds, 49 rings, the smaller ones, and 7 obscurations. At the end of each round, there is an obscuration, a repose period, just like the night that we experience every night. It's like our universe disappears when we go to sleep. We wake up the next morning and it reappears magically. But while we were unconscious, for all intents and purposes, it has disappeared.
The periods with Pralaya and Manvantara are called by the Dikshita,
Which is initiates.
Surya, Manvantaras, and Pralayas, Surya meaning sun. Thought is baffled in speculating how many of our solar pralayas must come before the great cosmic night, but that will come.
We do learn in the secret doctrine that the solar pralaya or solar manvantara is 7 times as long as our planetary, and that everything is multiplied by 7 for the solar pralaya.
In the minor pralayas, there is no starting anew, only resumption of halted activity. The vegetable and animal kingdoms, which had reached only a partial development at the end of the minor Manvantara, are not destroyed. Their life or vital entities also experience their corresponding night and rest. They also have a nirvana of their own. And why should they not? These fetal and infant entities, they are all, like ourselves, begotten of the one element. As we have our Dhyan Chohans, they too have, in their several kingdoms, elemental guardians, and are well taken care of as a whole, as humanity is as a whole. The one element not only fills space and is space, but it interpenetrates every atom of cosmic matter. And I'm sure that he's talking about Svabhat.
Yes, Svabhava is all manifestation.
When the hour of the solar pralaya strikes, though the process of man's advance on his last, 7th round is precisely the same, each planet, instead of merely passing out of the visible into the invisible as he leaves it, is annihilated in its turn.
All right, so in the solar pralaya, there is a destruction, just like in the universal.
With the beginning of the 7th round of the 7th minor Manvantara, every kingdom, having now reached its last cycle, there remains on each planet after the exit of man nothing but the maya of once lived forms. Wow, like an extinct planet, basically. Maybe that's like Mars.
Beings.
This is kind of what we think Mars might be.
Exactly.
With every step he takes on the descending and ascending arcs, as he moves from globe to globe, the planet left behind becomes an empty chrysalis.
Yeah, I love that
Wow.
visual. It's like the butterfly has left, it's gone through its transformation, and all that's left is the remnant by which we can speculate on what happened.
At his departure, there is an outflow from every kingdom of its entities. Waiting to pass into higher forms in due time, they are nevertheless liberated, for until the day of that evolution, they will rest in their lethargic sleep in space, until once again energized into life in the new solar Manvantara. The old elementals will rest until they are called to become, in their turn, the bodies of mineral, vegetable, and animal entities on another and higher string of globes on their way to becoming human entities. See Isis. While the germinal entities of the lowest forms, and in that time of general perfection, there will remain only a few of such, and will hang in space like drops of water suddenly turned into icicles.
Another really beautiful visual.
They will thaw at the first hot breath of a solar Manvantara and form the soul of the future globes. Whoa. Germinal entities, wow, form the soul of future globes.
That's why it's so important to not try to understand this in the normal way. You just absorb that.
Wow.
You just get the feeling more than anything else of how it works.
The intention of the whole reason that this happens.
Right. It's magical.
The slow development of the vegetable kingdom is provided for by the longer interplanetary rest of man. When the Solar Pralaya comes, the whole purified humanity merges into nirvana, and from that intersolar nirvana will be reborn in higher systems. The string of worlds is destroyed and vanishes like a shadow from the wall when the light is extinguished. We have every indication that at this very moment such a solar pralaya is taking place, while there are two minor ones ending somewhere.
So there are some of these that obviously astronomers were not aware of.
At the beginning of the solar Manvantara, the hitherto subjective elements of the material world, now scattered in cosmic dust, upon receiving their impulse from the new Dhyan Chohans of the new solar system, the highest of the old ones having gone higher still, will form into primordial ripples of life and, separating into differentiating centers of activity, combine in a graduated scale of 7 stages of evolution.
All right, so there, just to re-emphasize, nothing is ever lost. All of the experience accumulated in any of these periods of activity is retained. And when it comes alive again, it starts from there and moves further still.
Like every other orb of space, our Earth has to pass through a gamut of 7 stages of density before obtaining its ultimate materiality. And nothing now in this world can give you an idea of what this state of matter is. I say gamut advisedly, since the diatonic scale best affords an illustration of the perpetual rhythmic motion of the descending and ascending cycle of Svabhabat, graduated as it is by tones and semitones.
Remember the session where KH had entered into Samadhi and M decided he was going to give it a shot to try to teach these guys with his cosmological notes? And one of the first things he said was...
Like an octave, like a scale, huh?
Yeah. He said, go to your pianoforte and play a scale, starting with not the lowest note, but the highest note in the lower register, and hit the first note very softly, just barely hearing it. And then louder and louder and louder until you hit the bottom note. Boom! Then that's the Earth. That's the 4th round of this evolution. And then you reascend a little less loud and softer and softer, dying out until you can barely perceive that last note again. And he said, fortunately, I have some music in KH's old trunk that I learned these terms, the musical terms. Crescendo and diminuendo and moriendo.
You have among the learned members of your society one theosophist who, without familiarity with our occult doctrine, has still intuitively grasped from scientific data the idea of a solar pralaya and its Manvantara in their beginnings. I wonder who he's talking about.
I wonder.
I mean the celebrated French astronomer Flammarion in The Resurrection and the End of Worlds, beginning with chapter 4. I guess that's a book that this astronomer wrote?
Yes, he wrote many books. He, like the other scientists that the two Mahatmas have mentioned, was ahead of his time and was perceiving things that the vast majority of scientists weren't aware of and never talked about. He
Now,
wrote many books that were quite advanced.
was he alive at the time, or was he even farther in history? This
I think he was still alive at the time.
I wonder if he has a last name or if it's just like Madonna.
Well, Flammarion was his last name.
Oh.
His name was Nicholas Camille Flammarion.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wonder if that book is available, The Resurrection and the
I'm
End
sure
of...
it is. If you want something visual, you all probably recognize this. Have you seen it before?
Somewhere, yeah. I don't know where, though.
It's a woodcut that was in one of his books, not this one, but it's used quite often. The original obviously wasn't colorized because it was in a printed book. And it is used by New Age people in many different ways to express human beings being able to see beyond what's just on our physical planet. So that typifies what Flammarion was able to do. And by the way, he's very celebrated among French theosophists. The fact that one of their own scientists was mentioned by the Mahatmas was very cool, and it is.
He speaks like a true seer. I wonder why they didn't tap him to become one of the chelas, I wonder.
They obviously had their reasons, I don't know.
The facts are, as he surmises, with slight modifications. In consequence of the secular refrigeration, old age, and loss of vital power, solidification, and desiccation of the globes, the Earth arrives at a point when it begins to be a relaxed conglomerate. Its period of childbearing has passed. Its progeny are all nurtured. Its term of life is finished. Hence, its constituent masses cease to obey those laws of cohesion and aggregation which held them together. And becoming like a cadaver, which, abandoned to the work of destruction, would leave each molecule composing it free to separate itself from the body forever, to obey in the future the sway of new influences.
So just like any dead body, it disintegrates. It falls apart, has no more use for it because it has fulfilled its usefulness already. It bore children, saw them on their way, and it's done its job.
The attraction of the moon would itself undertake the task of demolition by producing a tidal wave of earth particles instead of an aqueous tide. If only he could know the full extent of its pernicious influence.
Yes, the moon has a lot of importance in occultism. It's a dead planet. It's a planet that was once living, that once had the focus of Dian Chohans and was full of life, and has fulfilled its functions. It's now a dead planet operating as a satellite of the Earth after having given much of its mass and much of its energy to the Earth. And it is now kind of in a destructive phase.
His mistake is that he believes a long time must be devoted to the ruin of the solar system. Now, is he still talking about Flammarion?
Yes.
Okay. We are told that it occurs in the twinkling of an eye, but not without many preliminary warnings.
So the end of a solar system.
That would be the sun supernovas, and it
Yes.
grows and it destroys all the planets.
And he believed that it was very slow. And he says, no, it happens in the twinkling of an eye, but not without multiple warnings ahead of time.
It's going to blow.
Well, for one thing, it's not as if they were in the middle of a Manvantara where humans were in the midst of their activities. No, it's a dead star. It's a dying star. And when it is no longer useful, it also disintegrates.
Another error is the supposition that the Earth will fall into the sun. The sun itself is first to disintegrate at the Solar Pralaya.
So again, the occult scientists were ahead of the physical scientists.
Fathom the nature and essence of the sixth principle of the universe and man. And you will have fathomed the greatest mystery in our world. And why not? Aren't you surrounded by it? What are its familiar manifestations? Mesmerism, ode force, etc.? What's ode force?
It's an old term that even scientists talked about kind of as a theory. The Mahatmas say it's based on fact, but I've never heard a real good explanation for it. It's a type of creative force. So just like mesmerism, where you can use it for good or for evil intentions.
Maybe it's prana.
It is a use of prana, a way of using it. The same with Reiki, any type of healing energy. It can be used to help people or it can be used to harm people.
These are all different aspects of one force, capable of good and evil applications. The degrees of an adept's initiation mark the 7 stages at which he discovers the secret of the 7-fold principles in nature and man and awakens his dormant powers.
Another hint here are levels of initiation as a chela up through adeptship and beyond are indicative of our ability to use and control the different levels of manifestation. First one obviously has to do with the physical. Second, with the etheric double or prana. The third initiation would correspond with the astral level. Fourth, with the higher mental, etc., etc. So there we have it. And it wasn't signed. Remember, Sinnett had transcribed these from the letters that Hume received because Hume, all of the letters he received disappeared. Thank somebody that Sinnett had the presence of mind to keep all of the letters, even though he didn't do a very good job as an editor of a newspaper in keeping them all together and putting notes on them as to when they were received and the circumstances. He didn't do a very good job at that, but at least he kept the letters, and they've been put back together pretty much in their correct order. This is a treasure trove of information, and more than anything else, probably something we will never see again for hundreds of years, if ever. And that is to get an inner view of the workings of the Mahatmas with their chelas. A little bit of a glimpse into their everyday life, how they operate amongst themselves with their chelas and with the outer world, because as we've learned, they inspire people that they believe have the ability to influence other people and to lift them up, to raise them up to a higher level of understanding. And that always implies a higher level of compassion and the feeling of oneness that one has to have in order to do that. If we feel that it's each man for himself, that doesn't help anybody, not even the person who believes that. It's only in uplifting other people and in sharing our understanding of these teachings with other people that we can attract the attention of the Mahatmas and that they will give us more understanding. Now we're going to introduce our special guest today, who, by the way, her name is Stephanie. And among other multiple talents, she's a professional florist, and she provided the flowers for us today, for which we are extremely grateful. It's a display, as she explained, of feminine and masculine energy, with the pinks and lavenders being the feminine And the beautiful magnolia foliage, which has a velvety reddish underside and a very shiny green, bright green topside as the masculine element. Everything in nature follows these laws of positive, negative, male, female, yin and yang. So,
I love the theme. That's so cool.
Now, let's introduce Stephanie.
I just wanted to thank Terry and Paul for letting me be here today. And I'm just so thrilled that they're doing this work. It's extremely difficult and time-consuming, but they're putting their whole heart into it. And it's for all of us. It's going to benefit any of us who watch. And I appreciate it so much, and I'm learning so much. And I am so inspired to connect with my higher self so that I can really absorb this teaching and complete what we're here to do in this lifetime. So I'm just so grateful to be here. It means a lot to me.
Very well said. Very well said.
Stephanie has been studying with us for more than 20 years, ever since Paul joined our study group and our endeavors, even before. And she is one of the people who has really absorbed the teachings and put them into practice in her everyday life. So she's an inspiration to all of us.
All right. Thank you for being here, Stephanie. And also, I guess we should mention that today is her birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Stephanie.
Happy birthday to our
gift to be here with you guys.
Our dear
you so
friend
much.
Stephanie.
Happy birthday.
She's very beloved by many, many people.